Welcome, welcome. And as always, we set the tone for our conversation in a slightly light-hearted way, but sometimes that's the best way to get involved in the topics we like to talk about. I'm very biased today because I am super pleased to have the lovely Narinder Gill on the podcast with us. Narinder, lovely to see you.
Lovely to be here, eventually.
Eventually, we've had a few technical issues, but you don't need to worry about that, listeners. That's just the way of the world. Probably the most important thing that I'm really, really keen to have Narinder here to talk about, and I'm sure if you've been listening to some of the things we've been sharing over recent weeks, is the new Institute of AI Education and the work from Narinder and Beth in terms of founding that and how it's grown. But also as a very experienced educator, RISE advisor, supporter in all sorts of different ways with the DFE, you fall perfectly into the pot of Matt and Al's why do we do it this way? What are we going to do differently? And how can we challenge the system? So I think that's probably where our conversation over the next 25 or 30 minutes is going to head.
Perfect.
So question number one, what's the big challenge that you're seeing and focusing on in education right now?
Wow. Did you say we only have 25 minutes?
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware, obviously, you're supporting the education system as a RISE advisor. You're seeing some challenges. So I thought we'd start with the big stuff and then we can zoom in a bit later.
I think the big stuff at the moment that our leaders are facing, so let's start with leaders first, because I think that's really important, is there's a lot of changes. And we have to really accept the fact that the changes have come really fast. We've finally got the white paper. That's kind of got quite a lot of ambition and aspiration, which I think I really like the white paper, but I'm kind of in it at the moment, considering if I'm a leader in a school now, what does it mean for me? What's the operating model underneath that? What's the resources that sit to support that? And am I now going to work it out and try and solve that? There's a lot missing from it in terms of the implementation. But I do firmly believe that nobody can disagree with what's written. I think it's how then is that going to look in schools where we have got a SEND crisis, we know that, and so the white paper looks very much as though it's about SEND, and it's not. We've got some reference to digital literacy and media literacy, but again, it's implied and not explicit. We've got some references to teachers that we need to recruit, but how do we start that? Where do we start with that? So I kind of do worry for leaders at this point. I think the job is really difficult from when I was ahead. I think there's a lot more that they're having to contend with. So big challenges are, how do we make sense of the current education system to support our children when we know there's even more reforms coming with what's been suggested with the CAR, the curriculum assessment review. So, and then I worry about teachers in the classroom who sometimes none of this hits them in the classroom, and how do they stay in the profession when they don't understand the rationale behind what is going on within the profession. I worry about
Just on
children.
that point, can I just ask you, we're a notorious interrupter, so I apologise.
Go for it. I could carry on for ages.
Behavior. Well, there's a disconnect, I suppose. We both have different roles within the DFE at different times. Yours very much more embedded than mine, but there feels a disconnect between the white paper and the stated aspirations.
Yeah.
And the reality of the capacity in the system, there not really being a significant injection, priming the pump when you drill it down in terms of numbers, and a complete absence of the capacity of human beings in the system to kind of meet that. So there's a kind of a will to want it to work, but there's also a cynicism that says you've got some really missing ingredients that you don't seem to have mentioned as part of that plan. Is that a fair challenge?
I think you're totally fair, and I think the last point I was going to make is what's really missing for me is children. I know the aspirations are all about children, but actually children on the ground, how is all this going to actually really make the difference? But again, I really do think you're right with the disconnect, but I'm always hopeful. You know, I've been in education for 35 years, so a very, very long time, and seen enough changes. And I think, so with everything I've said and with the disconnect, I think I'm seeing also real creativity in the system. People really working hard, not that they should have to, but real for people to take a risk and do something different if they just realise this is more than compliance. And I think, and that's hard because a lot of our leaders have gone through a system whereby they've always been told what to do. So they've always waited for permission, the younger leaders that are coming through the system. Do we need to wait for permission? Do we need to do something? Can we do something? Are our hands tied behind our back? I'm seeing a lot of hope in pockets, but what I would love to see is more genuine collaboration. We're seeing collaboration in pockets as well. I don't know where the money's going to come from. I think money is always the number one factor, and I really don't know where that's going to come from. But I think we as humans, we as educators, what can we do? Because if I'm a child today, how am I going to be grateful for the education I receive? And how can I, as a leader, as a head teacher within the system, try and translate it for the teachers in the classroom in the best possible way so that we are gatekeepers, aren't we, as leaders? What we try and do is take the best of the best and know our context, know our community, and know what's working, and not throw everything out or wait for the car to develop its system and go, oh, I'll now do the curriculum. Well, you're doing the curriculum day in and day out. So just continue doing what you're doing and do what works for your community. I think our leaders know their context, know their communities, know their children. Will that change? No, from the white paper.
I'm kind of with you, Narinder, although I can see Matt had
And
some
Matt's put a
nods
lot of
and some
faces through a
crunchy
lot I
faces.
said.
There's a whole heap in there, isn't there? So it's kind of only natural we're going to have nods and winks and winces along the way, I suppose. Matt, what did you want to share from your perspective?
There's a lot there, isn't there, Narinder, to respond to? I've tried to be positive about the SEN white paper. I think between that and the curriculum review, there have been two huge missed opportunities. I think there's a lack of children's voice in there. Why both aren't saying how do we get happy learners in school is beyond me. It's that simple, because everything else would be so much exponentially easier if children wanted to come to school. But they completely ignored that. I think the SN white paper, I think you have to be fair and say it has been well thought out and it's ambitious in some respects. It's never going to happen. As a head, what struck me, I think, is the funding figures that have gone there, and it feels like a playbook out of the Tories that we're going to commit this many billions to schools for this, to get supported from people that don't exist, which is also relevant to your comment about teachers and recruitment and retention. I think teaching assistants are absolutely important, key lifeblood of schools, paid an absolute pittance. I think it's disgusting, absolutely disgusting, that they've been omitted as a key voice in everything, because I certainly couldn't cope with our teaching assistants, and our staff spend is off the chart. And I don't know, years ago I spoke to somebody else called Phil Sharrock, and we were talking about an apolitical education system. It'll never happen in this country, but when the white paper came out, as we talked about earlier, I thought I saw all these wonderful things legislating for this and that. Well, actually, if it's not the same government at the next spending review, it doesn't mean anything, does it?
Yeah.
I think those all come back to that long-term vision of education.
Yeah.
If you think of a long-term strategy, it has to be apolitical. It has to be something that everyone signs up to and recognises that really politics doesn't have a place to play. I think sadly what Narinder was alluding to was money, and that isn't always in the education remit.
Well, I think that's my last point really, is that as a small rural primary school, and we have authorities that, however well they're performing, they're understaffed, they're underfunded. We've had to battle so hard to get every single AHCP. We're still battling for families that are struggling at home and kids struggling at school with needs and been waiting for 3-4 years for an ADHD assessment. And that legal protection of EHCPs and that SEN tribunal has so often with our MP involved, been the lever, shall we say, to get us what's needed for the kid, or almost what's needed for the kid, because it's never what you need. There's always a saving made by the council somewhere. And this new plan, because they haven't quite outlined how they're going to keep the protections in, I think is really, really dangerous.
I think, Matt, two things I'll just come back on, if that's okay, is one is I totally agree with you. There's no way I disagree with you.
Let's stop.
I think No. I think the small rural primary school, obviously, when I worked at my multi-academy trust, we had a lot of small schools, rural as well, and coastal. So our smallest school was 22 children.
Wow.
And one of the things we were trying to say is, actually, surely the funding formula has to be different for small schools. It has to. It doesn't equate to a larger school. It just doesn't make sense. So one of the things I know my CEO is trying to do is really look at small schools and try and do a national case for funding formula. And I think that I totally agree. I think we really need to look at that piece of work.
What's your definition of a small school, Narinder, just out of interest?
Sorry? So my understanding from the department is that working in my trust is it's under either 150 or 200. So I think it's 200, if I'm honest. And that is
more
not
than
a small.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think either 150 or 200, and I'll
Pretty
check
much a
it and
single
I'll email it.
form-entry, isn't it, all the way
Yeah.
through?
Yeah.
And I don't, a lot of our schools were 100, 120, and we had a couple of schools that were, one that was 400 and one that was but the rest 300. But the rest were all very small schools in that. But the 22, oh my goodness me. Every child mattered in lots of different ways, and you've got 2 classrooms.
It's just interesting. There's one in Cumbria which has, I can't remember if it's 9 or 13. And years ago on the forum, there was talk of closing it down, but politically they were never going to agree to it. But when you go to the west coast of Scotland, for geographic reasons, you've got schools with 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah, you have.
That's
that's where the funding formula does need to change. And then the other one that you mentioned was about teaching assistants. I think Estelle Morris was the only minister who got that right, if I'm honest. And I think this notion of teaching assistants, I 110% agree that they are there. They're your community. Our teachers come and go because lots of the time they don't live in the community. But our teaching assistants, 9 times out of 10, are the community, live in the community, volunteer as much as possible, give more than the hours of a teacher sometimes, and are the most poorly paid and the least amount of CPD within their remit. They come in at 9, they do multiple hats, and they leave. So I'm definitely on and I've spoken to Estelle Morris before about this, saying we really need to consider again and pick that baton up and think, how do we have a system a bit like the NHS whereby teaching assistants are banded? Because if I'm a teaching assistant, where's my career progression in the whole system? You got me on my biggest topic. So I could do a whole topic on teaching assistants, because I recruited in my last school teaching assistants through getting them off the street, so to speak. Come in, you are worthy of something. We brought in coaching for our teaching assistants, and I just think, because they are also your community in that they are your ambassadors for your school in that community. They absolutely read what's going on. If you live in a community where there's lots going on and you kind of need to know what's the word on the street, they will tell you. And they'll enable you to be preventative, why that child doesn't want to come into school, what's happened, how we can improve it. So I definitely think we should learn from the NHS on this, in terms of how do we have a banding system whereby they're at certain bands, and then when they reach a certain point, they can band over to being a teacher, a bit like a person in the health service. A nurse can go and be an advanced practitioner, and then from there they could actually be a doctor.
It was interesting. I was talking to the NCFE last week, who've done the report on teaching assistants.
Yeah.
And I was sticking my neck out and saying, I know teaching assistants, and some teachers like us who do a much better job than teachers, haven't got the formal qualifications in very different ways. And I know some teachers and heads that will say to me, well, we worked hard to get our degree, and I'm not disputing that, and they're professionally qualified. But actually, it's this whole black or white approach to everything we always have, isn't it? You have to be a qualified teacher to do this. I don't know. What's
back into the nuance of the system, aren't we, really? Because what we are saying is, you can our learners learn in different ways. Why can't somebody working in a classroom for years develop an understanding and strong pedagogical skills from working with great teachers? They can then apply themselves, as you say, in that. Well, I've been a TA for many years, and I'm now more than qualified to lead. It's interesting that that's one of the big capacity challenges we've got is the TAs. Yeah. There's a capacity challenge with teachers when it comes to send reforms and the specialists, particularly. I mean, for years we've had ed psychs and everything else. I love the fact we always end up with topics we weren't planning, because I think there's also that challenge about around the country. It's been the small rural schools that have been closing. Yeah. But they are also the community hubs that in many cases replace Sure Starts and others that were there before. And so they create a different kind of pressure on the system. And then the final one, well, not the final one because there's millions, but the other big one is kind of a nice, hopefully, segue for our chat today, which is there's a big shortfall in skills. And actually part of the government paper suggests that AI and technology is the panacea to supporting teacher capacity in the system. Now, there is some argument there, but the element of understanding how to use things purposefully and safely and ethically and is definitely lacking, which is kind of one of the reasons for bringing together really good folks to talk about how do we actually create a community of understanding on that kind of research-informed use of AI.
We joined the dots, Al.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I was trying to find a hard U-turn into that topic, which probably wasn't very elegant. But, these are all different topics where we all know there's challenges, and sometimes everyone nods, but not much gets done about it. Yeah. So, Narinder, please, for the benefit of those that haven't met you, haven't seen how much you've been passionately sharing stuff recently, could you just kind of give everyone a sense of how the Institute came about, what your aspirations are, and where we're heading over the next year?
Yeah, I will do. My co-founder, Beth Lane, or should I say Dr. Beth Lane, is unable to be here, but Matt and I'll invite us again and we'll come as a double duo. She's far more articulate in this area than I, because she's got a PhD in AI systems, having worked as a computer science teacher, but also head of leading digital strategy. So she's more grounded in the subject expertise, which I think is so important. And how it came about, you're going to love this, Matt, is through LinkedIn, is through a post on LinkedIn. And then I saw the words free. And obviously, when I was in my trust, we were under the 3,000 children, 18 schools under the 3,000 children. School improvement was me mainly. And getting from school A to B sometimes was 2 to 2.5 hours in some of the rural parts of North Yorkshire. So I saw free on LinkedIn, AI course for primary teachers. Well, I just jumped on and I was there. But we also know we get unintentionally distorted when the wonderful call comes from Ofsted. I had 3 consecutive weeks of Ofsted, 3. One when I was at Windsor Castle and I had to come back. I just unpacked, I had to repack and go. And I was like, I thought I made it. Clearly haven't. Back to school. So when we started the conversations, we started talking about primary, because Beth comes from a secondary background. And I said, I am passionate about what we do for our little ones from the beginning, because the Institute came about from thinking we have so much noise around the tools that are out there, so much noise about what AI is. But in my own trust, I was seeing really, really disjointed uses and understanding, and people thought they were doing a great thing by using the tools, but really no understanding of the purpose and what it was doing for the children and the outcomes. Albeit it was efficient, it saved them time, it saved them thinking time, it saved them planning time, it helped with workload. Some were looking at maths and how to break down problems. And so there were lots of different ways, but it was disjointed. And so Beth and I started these conversations and thought, actually, what we need is a trusted centre whereby people could come, find the information, but actually what we would be doing would be working with teachers on the ground using research. And so we have partnered with York St John University, and we've got a PhD student who started in February, and they're looking at doing a systematic review of how teachers are using it, how children are confident with the use of EO understanding, and parents as well. So the whole ecosystem of how it's working. And then we've got a pilot which is with 3 schools in York, and we've got early years, year 3 and year 5. And what we're doing is supporting the teachers, looking at their national curriculum and units of work for the spring term and going, how do we integrate AI literacy and the questioning skills and the criticality of how we look at the information we have from the subjects that we're teaching. But there's something else that comes with that. Integrate it rather than it being an added extra or an optional extra on, as I always say, a Friday afternoon finishing off activities kind of thing. So how do we make it so it is the thread running through everything we do? And so out of that, the Institute was born because we kind of wanted something that was bigger than the both of us. So something that stood the test of time, and in the North as well, because we feel the North is always poorly served. So we talk about equity and access. Well, we need to start in the North. And we also know that if we get it right, our disadvantaged children will not be disadvantaged, because we will have to be teaching it in everything we do as a way of being, not as, oh, well, only those schools who've got the resources or the capability will be able to do it. So the idea is within each region, we would have a hub and spoke model, and the spokes will enable people to have, this is showing my age, the old teach meets. We would look at having like an expert who has an AST in the area, so Matt, in your area, there would be an opportunity for teachers to get together, but somebody in that room will understand what is AI, how to use it, how to integrate it at the right time from the age of 3, 4 onwards.
That's the age
through the national curriculum, and then go and model it in classrooms, which is how teachers learn and develop, by getting in the classrooms, talking to them, and that's where professional learning will happen. So I think that's the ambitious aims, and we were so lucky to have Al as chair. I mean, it's just like, it's the cherry on the top, isn't it?
I rarely get called a cherry, but I like to think that...
You like the cherry on the top? I just still got cake in my mind from yesterday, so hey ho.
We always say the best relationships is where you can share and learn in equal measures, and that's a perfect one that I think works for this. Tell us about the launch event, Narinder, and what that kickstarts in terms of some of the conversations. I might chip in because decoration folk. I was there being noisy and supporting the fab work that's going on.
Oh my gosh, I don't think my feet have touched the ground since. I mean, so you imagine, Matt, for 2 years working on something that you think, oh gosh, this is what's needed. It just makes so much sense. And then thinking, now we have to share it with the world. What will they think? And we carefully curated it so that we had the movers and shakers in the room, because we know no matter what we do, if I had a room full of teachers, they'd get so excited. They know it makes sense. And then they'd say, however, but I'll just have to go and talk to. So we thought, right, who do you need to talk to? We'll get those people in the room. So we held it at York St John. Because of our partnership, they let us use their creative centre. So we're ever grateful to the support from York St John University. It is a tremendous university as well. So our campus is amazing. If you ever come down, we'll have to take you there for a coffee. It's just amazing.
We'll be there in a year's time, won't we, Narinder?
Yes, we will. You'll be there in a year's time. Yes.
Yes.
We'll give you the date. But yeah, so we held it there, and we had the board is made up of some amazing people that I will talk about who presented. But the biggest thing of the launch was we kind of held the launch to say, this is who we are. This is our sort of vision and why the Institute exists. But actually, over to you as to how we co-construct, as to what you feel the problem is that's keeping you up at night, and how we can actually solve it for you, with you, and make a difference so that the children and the learners of today can navigate a digital world that doesn't matter how it changes, they'll have the skills and the competencies to navigate that. They'll be good at asking questions. They'll be good at looking at information and going, that doesn't make sense. They'll be good at not jumping on a bandwagon. Teachers would be confident at understanding how to integrate it thoughtfully and where not to integrate it, and what the safeguards would be for how they use that. And understand what happens to the data, which I don't think they do. And we had a really good section on bias, which, I mean, every day I'm looking into this and I'm thinking I'm learning more day in and day out. Now, I've been looking at it for 2 years. I know Al's looked at it for a lot longer, but I just wonder how we get some knowledge and some depth of knowledge quickly to our people. I know I've thought it. I think it's brilliant. Victoria Headland, I must mention her.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. I was with her this week, talking to her this week. Oh, do you want to talk about the board? Because I think the board, the other thing, Matt, is wanted to have something that isn't cliquey, that isn't about certain characters and the biggest voices in the room. It's about everyone being able to fit and be part of something.
You're preaching to
Caroline
the choir
Keith
here,
was there.
Narinder. I tell you, yeah, that sounds amazing.
And whenever we haven't got the right voice, if you knock on our door, anyone out there, and you think you want to be involved, please knock on our door, because the more partners we have, the more people we have, we will impact better on our learners. And that's what we're about.
Just done you.
There's a whole bit about making sure we bring different voices. And there's, on one sense, there's an advisory board, which is to try and support. I mean, an advisory board in any level of governance provides reassurance to others involved that there's both support and nurture. And there's also challenge. Are we doing the right things? Are we thinking differently? What about? And so you need to kind of have a broad church, so to speak. But we've already started with the thematic approach that lots of other voices are get involved and come and share, so that we continue to grow. We have got some fab folks like Angela O'Brien, Bianca Farthing, that many will know, who's involved in a lot of the AI space. Some lesser known chap, Dan Fitzpatrick, that occasionally turns up talking about AI around the world. Dr. Keith Parker from York St. John. Dr. Miri Firth, somebody I had a fun trip with a couple of years ago in Riyadh, who's a senior lecturer at Manchester. Really, really great addition. Laura Knight, somebody who I could sit and listen to for hours, who's got really good experience from an education perspective, but really knows how to connect between the human side and the digital side of technology. Professor Dan Franks, a data science professor at University of York. Professor Ross Renton. I know Ross. Ross is the founding lead at the new University of Peterborough, ARU. Somebody that I've got a lot of time and experience for, and also has lots of experience in the digital space. Sarah Cossingat, Sean Connell from Halo Base, another founder, lots of innovation and ideas from a different perspective coming from there. Victoria Headland, the AI bias girl. You get a flavor. There's a kind of a mixture of people who have got a like-minded interest of not just waving the flag for AI, but how do we actually make this a safe and sustainable set of skills around the technology that others can use? That felt a bit like an advert there, but I think it's reassuring because there's some really, really good folks who have got behind this, and it's just the start. And I think the thing that you were feeding on was that co-production at the first start of this year was also about shaping the thematic strands that will feed into the regional events, brackets, Northern, because that is very much...
Nearly got a venue.
Yeah.
I'm very close, yeah.
But it is refreshing to make sure we capture voice from somewhere other than London. And I appreciate I'm somewhere in the middle of that geographical journey. But it is refreshing, and it's also refreshing, much as I've shared quite a few well-known folks who are trusted voices in the space, that it's also already an event and place and space where we get lots of fresh perspectives come and join the conversation too. So I like it. I think the final thing that I always want to try and do whenever we have fab folks talking about stuff, and obviously this is very close to our collective hearts on this one, is not to kind of think that in every topic or subject there's only room for one voice. There are lots of other folks doing some amazing research from a different perspective in AI, and we celebrate it and encourage it and hope we can foster connections and share as part of that web. Whereas sometimes in technology, we have had folks who kind of like, it's our voice or no voice, and that's where I think we struggle. So the broader the church, the better for us at Narinder.
I think so. And we're all responsible for children, aren't we? And at the end, if we start competing against each other with this, then we get in the way of the success of the child. And I think it becomes about us and not the children. So for us in the Institute, it's what's the right thing to do here? and how do we do it? And one of the things, Matt, we want to do is, obviously we're looking for funding, but we want to make sure this is a free resource. We want to be like the EAF of AI. So the actual institute represents the one-stop shop where you will have all the partners, every single one joined. You'll be signposted to the right research, the current research, but you're not having to, a bit like Al's newsletter, which I think does it brilliantly. It just takes up a lot of my Saturday morning because I kind of love reading what you do, Al. And it's there, it's compressed, and the opportunity, have we missed anyone? Let's put it in. But you'd have this space where teachers, and I keep going back to teachers need that professional learning. If we just have a tool and we say, here it is, here's the app, use it, it will help you teach year 5 history so much better. Well, do I know how it will help me? Do I know how I'm going to balance the pre-teach of the children who haven't actually got the concept of chronology yet, and we thought they had it? They don't actually understand how change occurred at that period of time, because some of that is quite sensitive based on who the children are that I've got and the context I'm serving. So therefore, I've got to handle this with care. No, the tool won't do that, but teachers getting together will talk about the problems they see and will be able to be responsive in the moment because they'll understand that they've gone through, which I keep going, how to design a task and that learning process and that thought process of how to teach, not how to deliver something that's been given. And I feel really passionate about, we've got to do that with our teachers somehow.
It sounds, I think educators need things like this. And I remember when I started teaching Vector, as daft as it sounds, provide little A3 fold-outs. It sounds like you're sort of in a position where you could do something similar, which would be amazing if you can get it to everyone.
Yeah. That's the aim. The aim is just to use the pilot study we've got, and the teachers, the initial findings are really strong from the teachers as how they've done it, and as young as the reception year, and looking at how we can actually make it, I keep saying a way of being, because the digital world is going to be a way of being, isn't it? So if we've kind of got a culture in our school where we talk about having a reading culture, well, we should have a digital culture around our school. We should have, no ceiling on digital literacy at all. It shouldn't be, we spoke to some colleagues recently, it shouldn't be a separate subject. It can't be a separate subject on its
It should be
own.
up there with English and maths, in my book.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a core subject. It's a core subject. I think
everything.
As we know, Narinder, the challenge that everyone's struggling with curriculum-wise is what do we tip out of the glass before we put more in? But that's a recognition, or having to recognize, that there is some stuff in that glass that really just isn't relevant anymore as we're moving forward at pace. Can we just also add on to that one? I think one of the interesting things here is we know anybody involved, whatever area within the education sphere, whether you're delivering it as a school, whether you're researching at a university, whether you're a vendor or an organization or entity supporting the ecosystem, that we all want evidence informed. We want well-founded, well-researched resources. So there's also a pathway here that says if you're a university somewhere else, or you're an institute somewhere else, or you're an organization that develops educational technology, there's a pathway to you to get in and support Narinder, Beth and the team doing research, doing further subjects that could align with some of the work you've already done to help provide that cross-triangulation and validation. And also, for the right reasons, be actually supporting developing those free resources that are going to be the kind of system-wide baseline in the future. So that's a little bit of a shop window, because I think people often think, well, how do I get involved? And the answer is, well, reach out to Narinder, Beth, myself, and the most important thing is we'll have a conversation. The ultimate aim is going to be beneficial so that we can do more research, get more information back out to the educator community. Then it's got to be good and worth a conversation. Did I get that right, Narinder?
I think you did. I think, our website has register your interest, so it's quite easy to do. And I think the more people we get within the system, changing the system so it's done bottom up, the better the system is that we devise, because only then will we get it not right, but we'll get it as near to what you need, rather than sitting in the old days of in an office writing something and churning it out and hoping that wrapper could wrap around all our children, which it won't do. It really won't.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. I'm very mindful we've got another session coming almost imminently. For those listening rather than watching, www.instituteofAIeducation.com. Check the show notes, whichever platform we're on, and we'll share those bits. Final words, Matt? Anything you wanted to tag on the end?
No,
other than, of course, check out the Institute.
Check out the Institute, but my wheels are turning around this idea about banded pay scales for educators and TAs and HLAs and teachers and completely redoing it. So I love that idea. I love that concept.
Do expect a message in your inbox from Matt?
Yeah, Matt, I'll be happy to work with you for whatever to do that, because do you know what? I think we should, and I think if Estelle, you're listening, I'm going to still be lobbying for what you. Yeah, I've still got the folder that she produced, Effective Use of Teaching Assistants, if you recall. There was I don't know if you're that old, Matt, but yeah, there was a lovely folder. Sorry? No. I'm going way back when Estelle Morris was minister. She produced a folder, ring binder. In fact, it's probably somewhere behind me, but I won't go and get it because that would really show my age. I've still got the toolkit from Speaking and Listening toolkit back in the literacy and numeracy stages. And some of those
those, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, it was before that. And it was very much about the effective use of teaching assistants, a whole folder on it. And guess what? We're just repeating it again.
Yeah.
And on that happy reminiscence of some of the things in the past and not repeating the errors of the past, do tune into future episodes. You can guarantee that Narinder, alongside Beth, will be back for another episode.
Yeah,
there's
definitely
plenty more to do. And as always, please reach out. And Narinder, thank you for joining us for today's recording.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Lovely to meet you, Matt, again. So thank you.
Nice to meet you again.